I got to say, I was a bit blindsided by this story coming out concerning the Supreme Court. And it makes total sense if I'm reading into this right without reading in the article at all, that the business model, which at one point in collegiate athletics was no business model, and then it became some kind of business model, lends itself to a review by the Supreme Court, possibly as to the amateur status of these athletes. It only makes sense. Is this a money-making proposition for these schools? Therefore, we're not looking at amateur athletes competing on Saturdays in particular. Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I got onto C-SPAN about halfway through the arguments in front of the Supreme Court via phone or however they're doing it based on the world we live in today. But it's interesting because, you know, hashtag stick to sports. So I'm not going to get super political, but you have two very defined wings of the Supreme Court, the right-leaning side and the left-leaning side. And it seemed like pretty much everybody, or at least 8 of them, all had already decided that this whole NC2A model of what they want and what they're pushing for, and they're not being this compensation, you know, is garbage, and that we're going to see some seismic changes coming up. You know, I think the question really is going to be, what was argued in front of the circuit court was very narrow in terms of what the compensation should be, somewhere around $59,000, $56,000 or whatever. What does this mean necessarily for name, image, likeness or whatnot? I mean, it's a lot. Let's put it this way. I took journalism law twice at Ohio State. I took it because I just stopped going the first time and obviously failed it. So I had to take it a second time before they would let me leave. It's going to be a very interesting case study, but I'm going to wait and read what some of the legal minds say about it. But, you know, my way too early prediction on this is that it's going to go against the NC2A, and it's going to kind of open up some of the floodgates to change what this amateur model looks like. And honestly, I think it's high time for that.
Yeah, I agree. I listened to some of the arguments as well. I got on the C-SPAN site, and they at least allow you to listen to the audio. I don't think there's still any live video of the Supreme Court arguments, which is unfortunate. And it was pretty spirited at times. What was interesting to me was you would start to – it's kind of like the debates where you will get into a topic and about 90 seconds or 2 minutes into it, the time is up. And just as somebody is getting ready to make a really good point, they interrupt them and say, okay, my time is done. The next justice needs to ask you their question. And it's like, just as we're getting to the crux of the matter, you know, getting warmed up here, they would cut it off. So I would like to have, you know, heard a little bit more of some of the different arguments. But again, a complicated issue. And I think at the heart of this, what the NCAA is trying to do is preserve competitiveness so that, let's say, Alabama, Ohio State don't have too big of an advantage in terms of recruiting top prospects away from Wake Forest or whoever else. And of course, you know, that flies in the face that they already have too big of an advantage, and that the sport that they're playing is an entirely different sport than what Ball State and Eastern Michigan are playing, and yet they're all under this one tent. And what sounds like a solution for the Alabamas and the Ohio States of the world to do full cost of attendance or whatever is not something the Patriot League or the MAC or some of these other places can even afford. And it was pointed out 25 schools make money on athletics and run a surplus, whereas the rest of them have to dip into general fund money, and student tuition money has to be used to underwrite athletics, which, you know, again, we come back to how much is too much. Ohio State's spending over $220 million a year on athletics. And are they spending it just because they're raising it? I mean, that's the kind of the bigger question that you come back to. Do they really need $1 million strength coach? Do they really need $6 million football coach? You know, I guess if you want to be the best, you do, but I don't. Do they need 4 assistant coaches making $1 million? I don't know. Remember a decade and a half ago, they're losing to USC when they had $1 million coordinators, and Jim Haycock and Jim Bowman were making $250,000. So money, it makes a difference, I guess. So complex issue. And I don't know how you solve any of these issues to the benefit of everybody, because there's just no all size fits one answer to any of this.
Was it when Urban Meyer was hired, Gene Smith said, we're not going to get into these arms races with the assistant coaches and their salaries. And then, last year, Greg Madison made like $1.5 million or whatever, Kevin Wilson.
Yeah.
So you have to, but to
he made enough he could afford to retire.
Exactly. With Steve's point, with the arguments of these being timed and the frustration of it, it's no different when I'm watching, Tony Kornheiser is about to make a point, and then boom, ding, his time is up, and then it's time for Michael Wilbon, and it's like, come on. And I think that's probably where they got it from. These, they see how the Supreme Court did it, and it's like, let's do a sports show about that. And then 20 years later, here we are. But this is one of those things where I haven't really followed it, because it's the NCAA, and 2, it's the government. So it's 2 slow-moving entities. And when something's about to happen, I'll figure it out, and I'll pay attention to it then. And maybe that's finally coming. I don't know. It's interesting that they're finally arguing about stuff, but when they start fixing stuff, maybe I'll get more involved. But I think where does the name, image, and likeness also occur in here? Because Ryan Day was asked about that on Monday and said that that's all in a holding pattern, but they're prepared for it. They're getting prepared for it, and they'll do whatever they can. And so there's a lot going on. And for me, like the name, image, and likeness, because that seems like it's more immediate. And so that's kind of, I think, more pertinent than what's going on with the NCAA and the Supreme Court. But again, that's just my biases against both of those 2 entities. But who knows what things are going to look like in 2 years, where CJ Stroud and Jack Miller, maybe Jack Miller, one of those guys sticks around because they can make $150,000 at Ohio State, and they couldn't do that at, say, Arizona State.
Just get me my video game.
Yes.
Just get me my football video game. I know they've been whatever findings and prior to the 23 season or something like that on my PlayStation 6 or whatever, but I'm a man. I'm 50. I turned 50 this year. I have very few video game playing days left. Just get me my damn game.
The arthritis is going to set in pretty soon.
I'm telling you, man.
Sony and Microsoft would be crazy not to have that that PlayStation 6 or that Xbox 2 or whatever to not be ready by 2023 and make you buy that next console to get that game, because how many people don't have PS5s yet? I don't.
I do.
And so people will have that within the next 2 years, but then Sony's like, aha, but if you want the football game, you're going to need to buy the PS6. It has one more gig.
They'll just microtransaction us to death. They'll find alternative revenue streams in there or whatever. You want to be able to catch a pass? That's $250.
Want to recruit like Bama? That's $150,000. That's Tennessee, sorry.
Unless it's Tennessee, and then it's a McDonald's bag full of money.
We want to be able to recruit